What is a prenuptial agreement? What does it do? And why is it important?
Sure. So a prenuptial agreement is a contract like any other contract that you may enter into between two people who are getting married. You can execute the agreement close in time to the wedding, although there are some issues with that depending, and you can execute it as far out in time prior to the wedding as you wish. And it is a document that sets forth what would happen in the event of a divorce with respect to your money and some estate planning as well. Prenuptial agreements by public policy cannot address children as far as it relates to their support or custody, because our law, when it comes to a child, looks at the best interest of the child, which real time matters. You can't predetermine the best interest of a child, particularly of one who's not born yet, and nor can you decide their support prior, because for child support, we look at all available income earned by both parents. So we're really talking about the money that couple may have prior to their entry into the marriage, jointly and separately, and the money and assets that they may acquire during the course of their marriage, how that would be handled in the event of a divorce. They are beneficial because most of my practice in New Jersey is divorce, and I can tell you firsthand that divorces can last for years, unfortunately. And a lot of that time is spent on discussing how to distribute the financial estate that has been acquired during the course of the marriage. And some of those bigger issues that can last a little bit longer is the attempt to trace premarital assets that existed prior to the marriage that were then commingled with marital assets during the course of the marriage. The prenuptial agreement will help you define what happens in those circumstances beforehand. In both scenarios, I do want to stress the importance of people retaining their documents. Banks have to retain documents in financial institutions for 7 years, but a divorce can happen at any time before, after, or at the 7-year mark. And if you are the party who is asserting that there's a premarital interest in what otherwise could be qualified as a marital asset, then you are the party who has the burden to prove that.
Wow. So yeah, that they're definitely important. As you mentioned, you work on divorces. That's got to be a very difficult thing. There's a lot of emotions. This stuff probably hasn't been discussed, and so dividing up the assets, who gets what, who put more into it, that has to be a very difficult process for both parties involved.
It is difficult, and that's one of the benefits of having a prenuptial agreement. You're having those hard conversations before you get married, which is really important, right? You'd like to think that before people get married, they're discussing whether they want children. They're discussing how they want to spend their money. They're discussing what type of life they plan to have together. But as we know, there is no requirement before you get married other than licensing and the solemnization requirements. So those conversations are not always had, but if you're having a prenuptial agreement prepared, your attorney is going to be talking to you about what you think you may want as far as alimony, what we call spousal support in New Jersey, maintenance it's called in New York, as far as that spousal support goes in the future. We're talking about whether you want to be reimbursed for separate property contributions made to a marital asset. And to be clear, separate property, there's a much more intricate definition, but the most broad definition I can provide is that separate property is any asset owned by either party prior to the date of their marriage, or that is gifted or inherited by them either prior or during the course of their marriage. When you're living in a happy, intact family, if you have a savings account of $100,000 before you get married, you may be okay putting that $100,000 into a house. If you, God forbid, one of your parents pass away during the course of your marriage and you inherit $50,000 or $50 million in some prenups that I've worked on, you may be okay setting up your family with that money. But emotions change when you get divorced. Are you going to want to see that money back? Do your parents have other desires for you in terms of how their inheritance is spent by you? Do they want to make sure that you retain their money versus the couple, or do they not care and they want your fiance to feel that they love them so much that they're fine if you don't get any of the money back, or frankly, you're so wealthy that you don't need to ever get any of the money back? Those are conversations to be had now. And those conversations can say a lot about a person and about plans and whether the people are like-minded in their thoughts. And it's better to work through them before you're married than to be going through a divorce and pay someone like me to work through them and realize that you had completely different ideologies from the get-go.